Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be discussing Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes and why you should read it if you haven't already. This is widely considered one of, if not the greatest novels ever written. It's widely regarded as the first ever modern novel ever written. It pioneered so many narrative techniques, I can't list them all today. It's also the second most translated book in the world, behind only the Bible. So needless to say, its influence and impact is enormous, and it's also an enormous book. So it's about 1,000 pages long. My Penguin's Classic version here runs about 982 pages. There are abridged versions out there, but I do not recommend them. I never recommend abridged versions for anything, whether it be Don Quixote, the Gulag Archipelago, whatever it might be. You should read the full version of it. You should get the author's full view. And then in the future, if you want to come back to it and read an abridged version, you can do that. But I highly recommend reading the full thing and immersing yourself in it, because it's truly one of the most special stories I've ever read in my life. It's honestly the funniest novel I've ever come across. I have never in my life laughed out loud more while reading than reading Don Quixote. The titular characters, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, have inspired so many duos, so many dynamic duos, from Batman and Robin to Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, SpongeBob and Patrick, Shrek and Donkey, Mario and Luigi, and even Han Solo and Chewbacca. So needless to say, this has had a huge influence on all fiction that has come after it. There's a quote here by Dostoevsky on the back, one of my favorite writers of all time, that says, "Profound and powerful, the final and greatest utterance of the human mind." So that's quite the compliment. The book actually was released in two parts. So the first part came out in 1605, and the second part of the book came out in 1615. Which is important to note, because in the second part, he actually criticizes and plays off of some of the critiques of the first part of the book. So he kind of gets a little meta in the second part, which is really interesting. And there are so many things to talk about with this book. I don't want to spoil it, because I really want you guys to go out there and read it for the first time. So eventually in the future, I will do like kind of a deeper dive analysis for Don Quixote. But today I'm going to go over the life of Miguel Cervantes very quickly. I'll go over a quick spoiler-free summary of what this book is actually about. And then we'll go over some additional literature, maybe some films, and maybe even some music that I would pair along well with Don Quixote. So let's get into a quick biography on the man himself, Miguel de Cervantes. Born in 1547 in Alcalá de Henares, Spain, Miguel de Cervantes led a life as adventurous as his most famous character. He served as a soldier, was captured by pirates, and spent 5 years in captivity in Algiers. Upon returning to Spain, he faced financial difficulties and worked various jobs, including as a tax collector. Despite these hardships, Cervantes pursued writing, producing plays, poetry, and novels. His experiences enriched his literary works, infusing them with realism and depth. Don Quixote, his magnum opus, not only brought him to fame, but also laid the foundation for the modern novel, influencing generations of writers. So yeah, Miguel de Cervantes led a very, very interesting life. I highly recommend looking more into his life if you have the time. It's not every day that you get to read a novel from a man in 17th century Spain. It's pretty unique experience. So I'm going to give you guys a quick synopsis of what this book actually covers without spoiling it for anybody. This is a spoiler-free video, and then we will move on to some additional literature. So here's a quick summary. Don Quixote follows the journey of Alonso Quijano, a man so enamored with tales of chivalry that he dons the persona of Don Quixote, a knight-errant determined to revive knighthood and protect the helpless. Accompanied by his loyal squire, Sancho Panza, Don Quixote embarks on a series of misadventures across the Spanish countryside. His idealistic quests often clash with reality, leading to humorous and poignant encounters. Through their travels, the novel explores themes of illusion versus reality, the power of imagination, and the complexities of human nature, all wrapped up in a rich tapestry of satire and social commentary. So yeah, hopefully that gives you guys a better idea of what's covered in the story. It's a little bit difficult to boil down a 1,000-page book into a short paragraph like that. There are a lot of adventures that happen within this book. In fact, in the very beginning, they go out on an adventure and they run into a little bit of trouble and they come back and they reset and then they go out on the adventure again. So I don't know. For me, I love getting into 1,000-page magnum opus works like this. There's something about it that's so unique when you're 200-300 pages into a book, and usually you'd be kind of wrapping up a book around then. That's like the average length of a normal book. You get like 200-300 pages into Don Quixote and you realize that the story is just starting. And it might seem like a bit of a drag to some people, like, man, when is this novel going to end? But I promise you, once you get through the first couple chapters, you're going to want it to last 1,000 pages because it's such a fun adventure. You fall in love with the characters. These are two of my favorite characters of all time, truly. And yeah, I just love this novel so much. So I'll throw up on screen right now some of Miguel Cervantes's other works. I've only read Don Quixote myself, but if you guys want to check out some of his other works and dive more into the man's writings, here are some places where you can start. So before we get into the recommended books, I want to give you guys a piece of music and an artist that I would definitely pair with your reading of Don Quixote. So the artist is Gustave Doré. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. You guys will hear me talk about him a lot on this channel. I think he's absolutely brilliant. And for Don Quixote, he illustrated over 380 panels. So you guys can check those panels out while you're reading through the story, and they kind of bring to life the imagery. And a lot of how I view Don Quixote in my mind comes from the illustrations from Gustave Doré. I think he's absolutely brilliant. Like I said, he's one of my favorite artists of all time, so I would highly recommend checking out his illustrations of Don Quixote. There are tons of fantastic paintings out there. I don't have enough time today to list them all, but Doré is at the top of my list. And the piece of music that I would recommend, I believe Ravel also has a piece of music surrounded by, or concentrated on Don Quixote, but my favorite piece of music that centers around Don Quixote is Strauss's Don Quixote. So I'd highly recommend listening to that while you read Don Quixote, if you can. I don't know, maybe some people are not able to listen to classical music while you read, but I find it to be a nice way to put me in the setting. And yeah, I highly recommend those two. But here are a couple films that I would recommend. The first film is The Man Who Killed Don Quixote from 2018. This was directed by Terry Gilliam, part of the Monty Python troupe. Some of you may remember him from there. Some of you may know him from his film career, directing brilliant films like Brazil. The Man Who Killed Don Quixote is not one of his best films. In fact, it's one of his weaker films. I just put it on the list today because it's one of the better adaptations out there. Notoriously, Don Quixote has been very, very difficult, if not nearly impossible to adapt. I believe Orson Welles took a crack at it and it fell through. And that comes to my second film that I would recommend. It's actually a documentary called Lost in La Mancha from 2002. And it's a documentary that kind of goes over the challenges in adapting this novel because it's very difficult. There's a reason why there aren't like a ton of great adaptations out there of this story. It's very, very difficult, especially the second part. For those of you who have read this book, that second part is like, how do you do that today? I don't know. But the third and final film that I'll recommend is from 1972. It's Man of La Mancha, starring Peter O'Toole and the absolutely gorgeous Sophia Loren, one of my favorite actresses of all time. I think she's very underrated for her acting ability. And I love that film too. Although, like I said, it's not perfect, especially if you're a fan of the novel. You're not going to find a movie that really encompasses this whole thing. It's basically impossible, but those are a couple films if you guys want to branch out and watch something along with your reading of Don Quixote. So before we wrap up today, I want to share with you guys 3 of my favorite quotes from the book. But before I get into that, really quickly, if you guys are audio listeners, if you guys don't like picking up a book and reading it like an old-fashioned person, if you guys like the audio versions, I would highly recommend on Audible using a credit to get the Don Quixote version that is narrated by George Guidall. I can't pronounce names on this channel. I apologize, but his reading of it was absolutely superb. It's one of the best read audiobooks I've ever come across in my life. I'm so glad I spent a credit on it because I will come back and listen to this audiobook many times throughout my life. I highly recommend that one, but here are my favorite quotes from the book. The first one is, "Finally, from so little sleeping and so much reading, his brain dried up and he went completely out of his mind." It's just a little short quote from the book, but I relate to that sometimes, so I like that little quote. The next one is, "The truth may be stretched thin, but it never breaks. It always surfaces above lies as oil floats on water." I absolutely love that. That's one that I come back to a lot. It's kind of like how Jordan Peterson will talk about how you can't really bend reality. It'll snap back at you. I think that's the same sentiment there. You know, you can't lie. You might get away with it for now, but it might come back in 10, 20, 30 years and bite you in the ass in a way that you didn't know. And yeah, I find that knowledge to be incredibly useful. And my third favorite quote from the book is, "Take my advice and live for a long, long time, because the maddest thing a man can do in his life is to let himself die." So I love that quote because it kind of just sums up the ridiculousness and the madness and the beauty of the book too. There are so many moments in this book where you will be laughing your ass off on the floor at something really, really silly the character said, and then you'll come back and you'll reread it and you'll go, damn, that's actually really deep. That's a lot deeper than I thought. So this book, even though it's silly at times, it can be incredibly motivating, and it can be uplifting, and it's, like I said, it's one of my favorite books of all time. So go out there and read it. Come back to this video. Let me know what you guys thought of it down below in the comments. And if you guys have already read the book and you're just watching this video for fun, then let's discuss down below this beautiful novel, because it's one of my favorites of all time, and I'm happy to share it with you guys today. So if you guys like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends to help boost this channel and the algorithm. Let me know down below in the comments which books you guys want to see covered next in this series. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, it means the world to me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.